Thank you, Daniel. Okay, so let's get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Angie Gillis, and I am the Associate Executive Director at the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq. We are here this evening, for those of you who do not know me, that is where I currently work. Originally, I come from Eskasoni First Nation, and I was asked by Chief and Council to act as your moderator this evening. This is, of course, a very important meeting, and one that we encourage all community members to attend, as it is in relation to a presentation on the 137 acres of the Ban St. Croix Reserve that started on July 4th, 1865. So tonight, what you will get is some details on a proposed settlement that the Chief and Council are recommending for settlement to the members of Annapolis Valley First Nation. These presentations will be quite in-depth. However, everyone should know that you will have time after the meeting to ask any questions, and the Chief and Council have offered to make the lawyer who is representing Annapolis Valley First Nation to be available to you either privately, by phone, or in person for any legal questions or legal advice you may seek. The amount of the proposed settlement, as you may already know, is $8,028,029, and also 100 of acres, which will be added to the band's land base as compensation for the settlement. So these details and further details will be provided by the presenters we have for you tonight. There are 4 presenters, in addition to some opening and closing remarks by Chief Tony. To get started, and before we go into our first discussion, there's a couple of housekeeping. Even before we go into that, let's, if we could have the opening prayer by our elder, Ida McLeod. Is she present and online at the moment? Is Ida McLeod on the call? Is there, can I get confirmation from somebody on the whereabouts of Ida McLeod, or if there is an alternative elder to open the meeting for us? Ida can't talk because you have her muted. Can someone from the technical team confirm we are unmuting Ida? Okay, can we have Chief Gerald Tony unmuted, please? Chief Tony, are you there? I apologize, everyone. We're having some technical difficulties at the moment. If you could just bear with me.
Oh, I think I might have it here now. Can everybody hear me?
We can, yep, we can hear you, Chief. We are
Okay.
getting some feedback on your end. Oh, that should be good now. No feedback now.
Yeah, my apologies to everybody. I'm just going to hand my iPad over to Elder Ida for the opening prayer, and hopefully we won't have any more technical difficulties. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chief.
I'm just going to say this in English. Is that okay?
That's great.
Okay. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. If she just shows up now.
Thank you, Ida, for the opening prayer. Now what I would like to do, if we could have our rules of our code of conduct for the meeting kind of come up to the screen, that'd be great. In the meantime, I'll start to kind of run through the process that will be followed. So just so that you all know, as I stated earlier, we have 4 presenters, and that's not including our chief. The chief will open and close the meeting. Each speaker will have a time limit of 15 minutes. There will be slides. If you have not received those slides, we can send copies probably post-meeting if you haven't received them yet. As stated earlier, only speakers will have audio and video for the meeting. All other band members will be observers only with no voice or audio access. However, as you can see on the right side of your screen, there is a chat option there. Please be respectful. So I guess that doesn't really matter because you can't speak, so we don't need that one. I guess there's some in the band hall, so please be respectful and quiet so everyone can hear speakers, as they'll have as many as 50 in the bingo hall from what I'm told. And again, we will be posting any questions received and not covered on our website through the fax after the meeting. These will be posted within 5 business days. So that is essentially the code of conduct for this meeting. Please feel free to email those questions immediately after the meeting. And with that, what I'd like to do to kind of keep us on schedule is turn the mic back over to Chief Tony for his opening comments.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, but we cannot see you, Chief. Do you have your video option on?
Yes, I do. Okay, here we go, I think. Can you hear me again and see me, everybody? Okay. Okay, I'll start off. Thank you, Angie, for your opening comments. You've touched on some of the stuff that I was going to speak to, so I'll just try to, I'll just start off on some of my notes here. But first of all, I'd like to thank Elder Ida for her beautiful opening prayer. So, good evening, Annapolis Valley First Nations band members and speakers. I would like to speak to the challenges over the past years in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. It has changed our lives in many ways, and the way we do business. I was told of a few members of Annapolis Valley First Nations that live from away that has contracted the COVID-19 virus. So our thoughts and prayers go out to you and your family, and hope for a speedy recovery. This is the reason we are having this information session virtually. The leadership of Annapolis Valley takes this threat of COVID-19 very serious, and I would like to thank our staff and health department for all the hard work and sacrifices they have made for our community. I would like to thank our band members for their patience and respect for the safety measures we have all put in place to keep our community safe. This is a team effort and a community effort, and for that I am very proud. I will let the members of our team speak to the history of this land claim. Just to touch base with the claim itself, the history of the claim, and the trust agreement. So we have presenters to go in depth on that. But I would personally like to thank the federal negotiator, Gary Vanderhayden, and the entire negotiation team. I'd also like to thank our current council and previous chiefs and councils that have worked on this file over a number of years. If this referendum passes, we will establish a board of trustees, and Ron Pink will speak to this process. Also note regarding the trust, people will have 30 calendar days from the time of the vote to get registration documents in place. I was going to stop here, but I'd like to speak a little bit more to that, you know, we're going to do everything that we possibly can to reach everybody to make sure all questions are answered. And anybody that has questions, please email, as you'll be instructed to do. Call leadership, the lawyers, our entire team are open just to take these questions and answer them to the best of our abilities. So I will stop there and turn it over to Jackie from IS, and probably have a few more comments during closing remarks. So thank you. And over to Jackie, thanks.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Yep.
I don't think you can see me. I don't know if my video can be turned on, or if you just want me to speak.
We can hear you. If you have.
I think John
Sorry.
has a presentation he's going to share his screen for. Just one sec.
Yeah. I'll start with my introduction. My name is Jacqueline Kaklasik, and I'm the electoral officer for the upcoming referendum. Just a few things that I wanted to go over to ensure you fill in your ballot and your declaration envelope properly so that your vote is counted. Everyone should have received packages in the mail by now. I sent them out to all people on reserve and off reserve for addresses that the band had on file. If you have not received a package, please call me as soon as possible, 902-397-2365, and I can get one out in the mail, express post. Okay, so just a couple of things. When you're ready to fill in your ballot, please use a check mark, an X, or any other mark, but don't write anything else on the ballot other than your mark to indicate your vote. Otherwise, your vote could be rejected. Once your ballot is filled in, please put it in the declaration envelope and seal it. If you're unable to complete your ballot by yourself, you can find somebody you trust to assist you in completing it. And they'll just need to fill in, check the appropriate box on the declaration envelope to indicate that they assisted you in filling out your ballot. Make sure you fill in all of the information on the front of the declaration envelope. This is really important. If your name is different than what appears on the membership list, such as a maiden name, please include both names and print your name clearly, as I will need to be able to read your name and check it off the voters list. If I'm unable to read your name to mark it off the voters list, the signature or date is missing, or the witness portion is not filled in, I will not be able to accept your vote. You will then need someone 18 or older to witness your signature, and this can be anyone. Make sure they've filled in all of the required information for their witness declaration. Once you've completed the declaration envelope, place the completed declaration envelope containing the ballot inside the prepaid envelope and drop it off at the post office. A couple of things to note: if you mailed in a ballot and you show up to vote on voting day, your mail-in ballot will be discarded and only the in-person vote will be counted. There's no way that anyone can double vote. If you received a mail-in ballot but you prefer to vote in person, please bring the blank ballot with you to the polling station and you can cast your vote in person. You can also fill in your ballot, put it in the sealed and completed declaration envelope and the prepaid envelope, the same as you would if you were going to mail it in, and drop it off at the polling station before it closes at 8 p.m. There will be a marked location specifically for dropping off these completed ballots. If you lost or spoiled your ballot, you can request a new one be mailed. However, please take into consideration the mailing time, because it needs to get to you and back to me by the close of the poll. If possible, if at all possible, you can show up to vote on voting day if it's too close. And lastly, packages will be available at the polling station on the day of the vote for anyone who planned to vote in person but is unable due to mobility issues or illness and so on. So you will need to arrange for someone to pick up the package, fill it in just the same as you would a mail-in ballot, and have it returned before the close of the poll at 8 p.m. And that's all for me. If anyone needs a package sent to them, my phone number is 902-397-2365. There's the declaration of voter envelope. Please make sure it's filled in completely. And there's the prepaid envelope. And again, any of the questions will be through the email address provided. That's it for me. Thank you.
Go ahead there, Lee.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name's Lee Weatherby. I'm with the real estate company of Turner Drake and Partners here in Halifax. Just very quickly, I've been in the real estate business for close to 40 years. I've been involved in land claims throughout the Atlantic region for the past 27 years. And I'm involved with several tables at the present time across the region. In 2016, I was engaged as a technical expert to represent Annapolis Valley First Nation on this claim. So I've been involved in this file now for a little over 4 years. And my responsibility was to prepare and compile a compensation claim that fit with the specific claim that had been accepted by Canada. Much of what I'm going to talk about is fairly technical. I do have some slides which I think will liven things up a little bit for the audience. So the land that we're talking of here is the land edged in red. So all of the land edged in red is what was originally the St. Croix Reserve. It was a little over 400 acres originally. Today it stands at 300 acres or thereabout, because the 100 acres on the right hand side of the picture there, if you're able to see that, claim parcel E100 is a 100-acre parcel that was included in a grant to a Mr. Ellershausen in 1865. So that's what causes the claim for that particular portion of the land. You can see in blue on that aerial in the entire area of the grant that went from the government to Mr. Ellershausen was close to 700 acres, but the deed included the 100 acres of what was originally the St. Croix Reserve. If you could just go to the next screen, please. So this is a close-up shot of the total 400-acre reserve, and you can see on the right-hand side the 100-acre Ellershausen grant. The rest of it, the other 3/4, is split into 2 pieces. There's a fairly obvious looking triangle in the middle, an inverted triangle. The 37-acre triangle, that's an important part of the claim, and there is the remainder of the reserve also has a claim component to it. For those 2 pieces, the triangle and the remainder of the reserve, the claim was for lost timber, or timber trespass as we called it in the claim. That's timber that was allegedly removed by other parties and by previous occupiers of the land over the years, going back to around 1865. So the claim here is a little bit unusual in that it's not what I would call a conventional specific claim. The 100-acre component, the Ellershausen 100-acre component, is certainly a typical spec claim. There's 2 components to that. In all specific claims, there is a current market value component. In other words, what's the land worth today? That's part of the compensation that you're entitled to receive. The bigger question is, what's the value of the lost use of that land from 1865, when it was alienated, up to today? That's the more complicated component. The rest of the claim, that's the 37-acre triangle and the remaining land, there's no current market value component there. You're not being asked to surrender any component of that triangle or the remaining lands. That is still reserve land. And for claim purposes, it's been accepted that it was always claim land throughout the entire claim period. So the loss there is for loss of use, and that's lost timber rights through trespassing. Where do we go next? The next slide. Go to the next slide. I produced 2 reports to support the claim. The first one, or the one I'll begin with, is the current unimproved market value of the 100-acre Ellershausen grant. That's a conventional appraisal. If anyone's familiar with appraisal reports, this is a conventional appraisal for the most part. It reports the value of the 100 acres at $55,000, $550 per acre. It's relatively remote land. a lot of the timber had been cut about 5 years earlier. You claim that through the loss of use component, not through the market value component. The land is pretty close to the wind farm that was built in recent years. There's about seven turbines now within 1.5 kilometers of this land. All those were factored into the appraisal to come up with a final value of $55,000. That's a very, very small component of the total $8 million settlement, but nevertheless, it's a valid component. By far the more complicated part of the claim, if we go to the next page, and I'm only including the cover pages of the reports here. The current market value report that we just looked at was a 32-page report. The next one, the loss of use report, is really a summary that I prepared, 29-page summary. Jointly with Canada, the band signed terms of reference to retain a timber specialist. We retained Forest Resource Consultants, FRC Consultants of Truro. They produced a hefty 42-page document that looked at all of the historic timber values and prepared models of how the land could have generated revenue for the band had all of the timber remained with the band and had it not been removed by other parties. So the report that I prepared is a summary of what they prepared. The next page, if you could flip to the next page. Yeah, keep going, that's the one, yeah. That's just a table of content showing all of the components that had to be addressed in my report in order to have it accepted by Canada as a loss of use claim. They have a pretty standard generic format that they like to see, and so it was my job to compile all of the information and present it in the format that they like to see. The bottom line here, if you go to the next page, this is a table which has the dollars on it, and you'll see the three components of the land claim, what we call the E100, it's 100 acres for the Ellershausen grant, the T37 for the 37-acre triangle, and the R275 is the remainder, 275 acres of the reserve. The way that the timber specialists compiled the claim was to say that the land could have been cut at certain periods of time, and it would have generated these amounts in stumpage values. If you take your calculator out and add those amounts together, they only add up to just over $50,000. So these are historic numbers going back to 1870 and at various points after that. If you take the $50,000 and add it to the current market value of the other land, which I referred to, we're just breaking over the $100,000 amount. So the obvious question is, how do you get from $100,000 into an $8 million settlement? And the answer quite simply is the updating of historic dollar figures into today's figures. And so we have fairly sophisticated compound interest models that take historic compensation numbers, bring them into today's dollars, and give us a total amount that can be presented as a claim. I don't intend to go through any of that process here this evening. It would bore you silly. And at the end of the day, I can confidently say to you here this evening that I'm not able to support any figure higher than the settlement amount that's being put forward this evening. All of my calculations support that. I'm looking at my watch here to see if I've gone over my allotted 15 minutes. I do have a habit of talking into the next person's time. I think I'll leave it there unless I'm instructed to continue. But I think perhaps one clarification that I would make just before we move on is the curious title of the claim itself, which is the alienation of 137 acres at the St. Croix Reserve. How do you square that with a 100-acre surrender, which is a subject of the vote here? The difference is the 37-acre triangle. Although an application was made when the claim was first submitted to Canada before my time on the file, it was determined that that land had never actually been alienated. It was always part of reserve, and so the claim for the 37-acre triangle is just, in my world, what we call a loss of use claim for loss of timber. So the only land being surrendered is the 100-acre Ellershausen grant. And with that, I'll say thank you for your attention, and I'll gladly take any questions that might come.
Ah, there we go. I'm unmuted. That's great. Thank you, Lee. And we're actually doing very well for time. Excuse me. Our next presenter tonight will be Jim Michaels. He is going to give the offer overview and his legal opinion of the offer. So, Jim, once you're unmuted, over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Angie, and everybody on the team. I appreciate how cumbersome this is, trying to do this through virtual means, but such as the reality we're living today. I just want to thank Chief and Counsel and the team, the negotiation team. It was a very trying set of negotiations. Canada had 5 different negotiators. So it was sometimes there was a breaking continuity at times, but as the chief had mentioned, Gary Vander Hayden, once he took carriage of this file, he stuck with it and seen it through. So I'd like to send out appreciation to Gary Vander Hayden as well. Okay, I'm ready to go to my now I'm here to talk about the settlement agreement and so on, but everybody has a copy of it. What I'm going to do is hit the meat and potatoes, if you excuse my my analogy, and the high points that I need to draw attention to band members for when they're considering to vote yes or no. And by all means, this is as Lee said, this is as best deal as the team could get. We didn't think we could get a better deal, and that's why Chief and Counsel made a decision to recommend it to go to the community for a vote. The community ultimately has the power to accept this or to reject it. So it's in the hands of band membership. So for and this is a part of the everybody will probably look at this. I'll just hit some of the high notes here. Compensation is $8 million minus the loan funding, which is I think about 337 or so. And 2.5 Canada agrees to pay and transfer the compensation balance within 45 days of the effective date. That's not to be confused with 45 days from the vote of May 5th. After May 5th happens, the vote has to be certified. And then I'll touch upon it later on in my presentation, but Canada has some conditions precedents and so on before they will sign. Once the minister signs, then Canada has 45 days after the minister signs off on this agreement to deposit or transfer any money to the band. Okay, my screen is blocking out. Can I? Okay, great. My screen was, my chat thing was blocking out some of the stuff. And one other thing is that this compensation is not Indian monies for purposes of the Indian Act. For the management of Indian monies under the Indian Act. So this is outside of that sphere of of the Indian Act provision. Now, if I can go to, okay, surrender 3.0, and this is important. This is what Canada is asking band membership to do, is to completely and absolutely surrender the interest, any interest that they have or may have in those 100 acres. So it's a very serious situation, and all band members should be well aware that if they're surrendering, they have to surrender everything, all aspects of this claim in totality. Number 4, as Angie had mentioned a little bit earlier, additions to reserve. Under this settlement agreement, the band can make application any place in Nova Scotia to add up to 100 acres to its reserve under the relevant additions to reserve policy in force at the time. And there's no size limit or time limit. So, I mean, obviously you got to find a willing seller, a willing buyer, but the band could conceivably buy 5 acres in one shot deal, or they could buy 100 acres, they could buy 50, 40. So there's no set formula other than Nova Scotia is the selection area for any potential additions to reserve. Next slide. And this, again, this is the another serious or major compact component of this, is that Canada is asking, and Annapolis Valley Band Membership have to release Canada and forever discharge Canada in any in relation to this claim. What that means is that basically we're letting Canada off the hook, if I can talk plainly for a second or two here, or probably for the whole thing. I hope I'm talking plainly. So what we're doing is saying, okay, if we settle this, we're forever letting Canada off the hook in relation to the 37 acres of timber removal, as well as the 100 acres that was granted away back in 1865. And again, it lays out what band membership is being asked to release Canada from. And here you'll see the things, the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I won't say anything, but other than any aspect of the claim, that's a very onerous clause that I want to draw attention to. As well, we're going to say we don't have an issue with the adequacy of the compensation. If there's any, if a bank collapses, or if the trustees mismanage it or whatever, basically we're agreeing, or we're going to agree, if the vote is successful, that Canada is not responsible for that. And in relation to this release is the next page, 6, which is the indemnity clause, which basically once again says that if Canada gets sued by any other party, then Annapolis Valley will be sort of shouldering the liability on this, or at least stepping in to also defend this thing. But there, I mean, there's some very small instances where Canada may not enforce this indemnity, and I draw your attention to 6.8. No, sorry, my apologies. 6.7. So basically, if the band gives notice if someone sues Canada, or there's challenge in this, whether it's another person, entity, whatever, Canada gives us notice. Annapolis Valley has 30 days to say, we agree with it, or we don't agree with it, and here's the reason why we don't think it's a good deal. You shouldn't settle with this third party. And if Canada goes forward anyways, despite our objections, seeing 6.7, then Canada will not require the First Nations to identify it under Section 6 in connection with the proposed settlement. But again, that's still, we would still have to make representations on why we don't think there should be any settlement on that. Next page, please. This is dry stuff, dry going. I wish I had graphics or whatever. Okay, ratification. Obviously, you can't pick or choose which 3 ballot questions you have to answer. You have to accept all of them. If you don't like one, well, you have to vote no. You vote no against everything. So it's either you're voting for all three or you're voting against all three. You can't pick and choose. And in relation to this, is there's potentially two kicks at the can here. The first vote on May 5th, if we have a double majority, as it's called, where a majority of band members of voting age show up to vote, and the majority of those vote in favor of the settlement agreement and the trust agreement and the absolute surrender, then it passes. But if we get less than 50% of band membership to participate in the vote, but of those that voted, if the majority of those voted, then the band can make an application to the minister and say, ask her to order a second referendum. And if a second referendum is held, then it's just a simple majority, which means whoever shows up gets to vote, and the majority of who voted carries the day. So there's no need to have a majority of voters showing up on the second vote. Next one, section 9. And these are all the conditions precedent before Canada will consider executing the settlement agreement. And as you can see, there's 10 or 11 different things here. I won't go through all of them, but basically they have to receive all this paperwork and be satisfied that band memberships made an informed decision. They knew the consequences, the nature and consequences of their decision, and that there's administrative, such as receiving BCRs, directions to pay, and so on. I won't, like I said, I won't go through all of that, but I'll be by all means, phone or email, post your questions, and I'll answer them as best as I can. Next slide. This is what the Annapolis Valley is representing to Canada, to band membership, I guess, to the world. These things, and I draw your attention to 21.1 Clause A. The First Nation represents and warrants that it intends to use the compensation balance for the benefit of the First Nation, and shall take such action and shall take such actions as it deems necessary or advisable to give effect to that intent. Basically, Canada currently has been taking a more hands-off approach on these settlements, whereas before they would kind of try to dictate or at least influence how bands manage this money. Now they're saying you have to tell us that you're going to use it for the benefit of the band, and that's all Canada sort of needs to know. Well, other than the technical stuff. And again, you can see Canada has to satisfy itself that I presented this to you, that Ron Pink explained the trust to you, and that Eckers gave some independent business advice, just to familiarize yourself with both the settlement and the possibilities of what could be done out of this. Okay. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Actually, I think some of my things got cut up, not cut out, but cut out. Okay. Amendments. Actually, this is not on there, and I apologize, but I just want to say that if there's any amendments, if it's substantial amendments, if it's something that's is going to have a real impact on the settlement agreement, Canada will change it with the Annapolis Valley, provided there's another referendum vote or whatever. So we have to go through this process again if we want to make any substantial changes to this agreement. But if there's admin changes, then that can be done just by written agreement between the band and Canada. And admin changes would be like ensuring that we're in compliance with all laws and regulations. Or if there's, you may see there's 30 days notice requirements and so on. We could amend the time and extend that time or whatever. And the third way is just to correct any typos or anything like that, errors or whatever. But these would be all administrative things. Anything substantive has to go back to band membership for a vote. And then in 17 general provisions, I just want to point this out. This settlement agreement is for the benefit and fine upon Canada and the band. The settlement agreement is entered into by Canada and the Annapolis Valley without any admission of fact or liability whatsoever with respect to the claim. That's in there because the band also has options with this. If this fails or we're not happy with it. There's also taking Canada to court or going to the Independent Specific Claims Tribunal. Those would add many more years to this, and there's no guarantee we would get the same amount of money. Quite possibly we could get less. Maybe we might get a little bit more, but then membership has to look at, okay, we know we're getting this versus the unknown of taking this to court in the independent tribunal. And these negotiations and discussions were all on a without prejudice basis. So Canada can rely on its technical defenses, statute of limitations, latches, acquiescence, and so on. So it would be an uphill battle. Next page, yes. And the next page, and again, I apologize if it seems like I'm running through this. I just really want to hit the high notes and drive people's attention to it. This is the absolute surrender document that you will also be asked to vote on. And I draw your attention to the right-hand side of the page. As a voter of the First Nation, do you agree to all the terms and conditions of the alienization? And again, Lee Weatherby spoke to the title 137 acres of St. Croix. It's 100 acres plus 37 acres of lost timber. Do you assent to the absolute surrender of all rights and interests in that 100 acres? Now that's everything. You can't cross your fingers and say, well, we're going to surrender some things, but we're going to retain anything. It's absolute, as in the band walks away from this. There's no existing interest or remaining interest in those lands. And finally, band membership has to authorize and direct the council, the First Nation of Annapolis Valley, to do everything it takes to give effect to the settlement agreement if it passes. Next page. Okay, I think that was my my run, and if there's a time permitting, I'll go back to 2 or 3 classes, but I just really wanted to hit the high notes for band membership to consider. And by all means, email any questions you may have to me at the email address. Thank you, Angie.
Great, thanks, Jim. That was that's great highlighting you did there, and I agree. You know, with any type of negotiation settlement, you know, taking something to court, there's always that risk, one way or the other. What's going to happen with a settlement? It'll either go up or it'll go down.
Yeah.
And it's deciding on the risk as a band member.
And,
so at this time, oh, sorry.
No, and not only that, but it's going to cost the band more time and money to come to a conclusion if we went to court or the tribunal.
Correct. Yeah. So at this time, and again, thanks, Jim, for staying on schedule. We're doing great. So our next speaker that we have with us today is Ronald Pink, who is the band's trust lawyer, and he's going to provide members today with his legal opinion of the trust agreement, as well as provide a high-level review of that agreement. So Ronald, over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. I can't speak to, oh, there we are. Okay, I'll try to do this quickly. So let's talk about generally what are the issues that we're going to talk about. Put in perspective, after some distribution of monies from the land claim settlement that you're going to receive, there'll be a residue of the land claim settlement which is going to be set aside. And what the band has asked me to do is draft an arrangement whereby we can have that money set aside for not only the current members of the band, but for future generations of the band. And so what we've decided, what we struck to do, what I was asked to do, is put it into a trust. Now, if you go to the first page of the handout, a trust is a legal agreement where the property, do I change the page here? Perfect. Where the property of a person, band members, is held exclusively by a third party, the trustees. So essentially, the trustees hold the property, which actually belongs to you, but they hold it in accordance with the terms of the trust only for the benefit of the property owner that is members of the band. They can't use it for their own advantage. They can only use it for the advantage of the beneficiaries of the trust. So if it's hypothetically, it's $3 million they have to hold in the end. Legally, they own that property, but they hold that property in trust, the $3 million, for the benefit of the plan members. So, which is, or the benefit of the band, and so they have to only act in interest for the interest of the band members when they deal with that trust. Okay, so that's what's going on here from a high level. Okay, next page. And so the purpose of the trust is set out in the trust agreement, which I understand you have received, but it's to hold that money in trust and invest it, and use the investment income, not the principal, but the investment income for economic development purposes for the band, and that's to be used to improve infrastructure, to provide funding for new businesses, or any other matter the Board of Trustees think is in the interest of the band. So you understand, they don't get to spend the principal, they only get to spend the income. And the income is generated, as Kyle will tell you shortly, over a number of years. And so this is not going to be instant money in the morning. It's going to take many years to build up a fund to do things, and that will be the obligations of the trustees to invest this money as best as they can to get an income to provide seed money, pardon me, or other things for the interest of band members. Next. So you'll see here that the corpus, that's the body of the trust, can only be used, can't be spent. It's only the income that can be spent, and there are applications that come in to the Board of Trustees how the money should be spent. Likely will all come from the band, but just because a band says we want to put hypothetically a candy shop on the reservation, so please give us $100,000 to do that, the trustees say, no, we're not going to do a candy shop. We'd rather improve the water system. So we're going to save the money this year, and we'll hopefully gain more money next, and we're going to put it into significant issues to improve the water and sewer system inside the band. That's the role of the trustees. They get to make that decision. Okay. So then you'll see who are the trustees. There are 7 trustees. Next page. There are 7 trustees. And it's set up such that what we desire to do is make sure, and this is very difficult, I don't want to be unkind when I say this, we want to make sure that there's no politics in the trust. So, and I've seen it in other clients I've represented, a new council comes in and they want to sweep the old council, they swept the old council, they want to do things all differently, and they say, no, let's get control of that trust and let's divide the money up for the benefit for the members of the band. That's what we promised. No, that can't happen here, because only 2 trustees will be appointed by the band council, and 4 trustees will be independent. So people from the community could be Aboriginal, could not be Aboriginal. It's up to you for the council to decide, and they'll find the people who will come and sit as service trustees, and then the trustees themselves will appoint an independent chair. So, the council will appoint the four independent trustees, but all the trustees together will get together and find the chair. And what we've done in the past in these situations, we have chairs who are very reputable in the community, knowledgeable about how investments work, and knowledgeable about how trusts operate. So we'll find the right person. It's not a terribly demanding job, but we'll find the right person to do that. And so these 7 people then will run the trust. So there's 2 from the band and 5 from outside, and the 2 from the band can be appointed by band council. Maybe band members, don't have to be, but if they are band members, they cease to be band members, they stay on as a trustee no matter what until the term expires. Okay, that's how the Board of Trustees is going to work. but they are completely independent. They hold, next page, they hold appointment for 5 years or until their resignation or death, if either should come earlier. And they can be removed as a trustee for not doing their job, but it's a complicated process. It's all laid out there. Hope it never happens. But so then if they don't do the job they're intended to do, like don't show up or whatever, then that's a problem for the trust and for them as trustees, and they can be removed. But so it's all set out in the trust agreement how it's going to work, but the trustees are completely bound by the document. So what happens? How's it work? So the residual monies, next page, sorry. The monies after the shoot were given to the trustees, who will then place the money with an investment manager, you'll hear from him shortly, who will oversee the long-term investment of those monies. And they'll, with the help of the investment manager, they'll invest those monies to ensure that income is made for the purpose of the trust. And then what happens on the next page? What happens is that the trustees will receive applications for the utilization of the income, not the principal, only the income. And the trustees don't have to spend the money if they don't think the application is worthy enough, or they don't think there's enough money to spend. It's completely up to them how they do it. But understand, they can only do it for purpose of improving the quality of life for band members through infrastructure or economic development. That's what they do. It can't use it to pay, hypothetically, to pay power bills or that sort of thing. No, it's only to be used for purpose of economic development, infrastructure renewal, that sort of thing. And they alone, the trustees alone, get to decide whether the project is worthy or not. The band council has no say. And this is all overridden by the principle that the band members, the trustees have to act in the best interest of all the band members. So they may have a pet project, but they can't let their pet project come to the fore because they support it. No. If it just helps them or one or two of their friends or their voting constituency, they can't do that. They have to do what's in the best interest of all the band members. And that's why having an independent board, largely independent board, is so helpful in this situation, because they're not getting elected. They have no axe in this fight. So they just do what they think is best for the band. It's a very interesting process, and I've seen it work, and it does work. Okay, so then the question is, next page, what role do I have in the Operations Trust as a band member? The answer is none. Band members have no role whatsoever in the day-to-day operation of the trust. The trustees have to do all the work in a way that it provides investment opportunities for the community as a whole. But they don't act on behalf of any single member. They have to do what's in best interest of all the band members. So you have to understand that you can, I guess, but it doesn't make any difference. You can sit outside and take all the pot shots that you want as a band member, but your vote doesn't count. They have to act in the best interest of all the band members and do what they think is best for the entire band, not for, as I said before, a single voting constituency. That's what they have to do. And how long will the trust last? Well, I say the trust lasts hopefully forever, or as long as there's money left in the trust. I guess if worst came to worst and they lost all their investments, all goes, it would wind up. But if their investment income coming in, then those monies have to be spent on behalf of the band members upon application. Band members don't have any role with respect to the Operation Trust, except through the election of counselors to the band, who may then get elected, or they may get elected to on the Board of Trustees or appointed to the Board of Trustees. But that's when they get on. You can't have, you see, this is the big thing. Band members can't try to get elected to council. Say, if I get on council and I want to be a trustee, I'm going to change that trust around and going to do what I think is best for me and my constituents. Can't do it. You don't have the authority. You don't. That's not what a trustee does. A trustee has to act on the best interests of everybody in the band, not just you and your friends. Okay. So how will it affect me directly? Next page. There's no benefit to you directly. Personally, the money's invested to enhance the economic development of the entire band. You too. So hypothetically, if you were to build a cannabis factory on your land with money from the band, with money from the trust, that is, and there was income coming into the cannabis factory, well, that goes to the whole band. It doesn't go to the trust. It goes to the whole band because the trust will fund the development of the cannabis factory, and the sale of the cannabis and the people working there will all benefit the band and its members, and that's how you gain interest. But you won't get interest from the trust directly, i.e. that you're going to get money to do something. That only comes from the interest of the band and the band's approved economic development measures. Okay, next page. If I'm unhappy, well, if you're unhappy, you may have to be unhappy. I'm sorry to say that. But the purpose of the trust is expressed in section 4 of the trust, Article 4, and the trustees are bound to only do what Article 4 says. So you can't, you shouldn't expect that there's going to be monies for you personally. It's not going to happen. You're only going to get the money that comes from the income of the properties that the band utilizes, and how the band decides to spend that money will be up to council and ECDEV. It will not be up to individual members. So I don't think you should expect any windfall personally from this. It'll take some time. And you'll see on the next page that the trustees, and I keep saying this over and over again, they get to make the determination what will be the utilization of the monies in the trust. But once they give the money to the band, for economic development, the spin-off of that economic development is the band's money, not the trust money. The trust only seeds the operation. The operation of what the band's doing is an ECDEV matter, and the income from that will go to the band, hopefully. But you have to understand that the trustees have the sole discretion to make decisions in this matter, and their decision is binding on the trust and effectively on all band members. And then finally, can the trust ever be changed? Yeah, it can be changed. It's very difficult. We wrote it in such a way that it requires unanimous consent of all trustees. So one trustee can prevent it from happening, or a majority of trustees in the band to agree. So it can be changed. It's possible. We've made it like a big hurdle to overcome because we don't want to be changed every week. That's not in the best interest of the band in our theory, in our operation, and we think it should be stable, long-term operation without without much change over time. Now, I've had some questions, and Jim and I have had discussions and emails with some band members about why we do this and why is it 5, not 7, who appoints, who doesn't appoint. You can design a trust any way you want. We've designed it this way because we think this will work best for the beneficiaries, and it's trying to be proven not to be how should I say, subject to the internal vicissitudes inside a band, and that it's not a political football. We want this to be a stable, steady income flow for the band for big projects that are going to help improve the lives of band members in the future. And then finally, so what is it in the end? You'll see in the last page. Not the first time this has been used. We've done this in other claim settlements, and I just saw yesterday that a band in New Brunswick actually took this sort of style and used it for themselves. So it's a successful methodology, and we strongly recommend it, and the government has approved this in the past, and I think with respect that if we do it, it'll be successful for everybody concerned, and it'll help the interests of the band in the future. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ron. So will Kevin, I believe his name is, be speaking to how the residue that flows into the trust is determined?
Yeah, Kyle's going to do that.
Paul? Okay, Kyle. Okay. And just that residue will become the primary amount that cannot be touched.
Exactly.
That will sit as a seed for as long as the trust exists. It's only going to be the interest that is being accrued on that amount that will be available for use.
Perfectly correct.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So Kyle, welcome.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. I think I've got some slides there too.
Okay, let's get those up.
To. All right. Okay. I think we just go to the next one. And then maybe the next one. Okay, so I just briefly, just to give you some context here. So I'm Kyle Whedon from Eckler. So what we are and what our role here is to give independent investment advice, and really it's independent investment advice, relative to a trust that Ron just spoke about. Just one thing very clear here, it's a little bit about our firm, but the biggest thing would be kind of the third point down there is that we operate as a fee-for-service advice model. So we are an investment consultant that would operate similar to any lawyers that you have here tonight talking to you, where basically our advice is given to the trustees in this sense about how to structure a trust, and then obviously how to invest those assets, and then to use that income, as Ron spoke, for the development of the band. We have no vested interest in how you invest money. We don't actually invest any money directly. So how we would operate would be giving advice to how to structure those investments. There obviously, when you do invest, ultimately there are fees for investing your money, but obviously the goal here is to generate income in and above that. Our role here is really as an independent, piece of advice to give the trustees some idea of how they could go about doing that. So that's the role of kind of our point here. We can go to the next slide. That's just a little bit about myself and my credentials, which would bring me here tonight. I actually consult to quite a few other trusts as well, so this would be something that I do on a regular basis. So we can just go to the next slide. So again, we're here really to give you independent advice on how to structure the trust. And really our goals here, as we said at the outset, was to give you a high-level overview of best practices when it comes to trust investing. And the second piece would be, obviously, if there's any questions that come out of the meeting, we would be available, obviously, to assist the band and anyone else in trying to answer those and giving you those answers back to try to help you with your vote. So that's really what we're trying to do here tonight. So you can go to the next slide. So this is an important concept. As Ron said, the trustees are going to be ultimately responsible for choosing how to invest the money. So obviously, the compensation for the land surrender goes into a trust. That money is in that trust and then invested. And it's only supposed to be the investment income that you make on those monies that are going to be spent. So if, for the same example that Ron used, if there's $3 million that goes into the trust, and the first year a project comes up for $1 million, it's quite likely you couldn't do that because you'd be spending into the principal. So when we say the principal, we're really talking about that initial amount of money. And then we're going to invest that money, and any income it makes is going to be available to be spent. The reason why it's structured like that is because the trust is supposed to go on in perpetuity forever. And obviously, if you're spending into the original amount, the likelihood of it continuing forever is not high because you're spending into that money. So the trustees have to consider these objectives when they determine how they want to invest the money. So the first part here, we just have a 1, 2, 3 kind of simplification process of what the trustees are going to be going through. The first one is they have to develop an investment policy. So there's a trust in place, as Ron spoke, that dictates how the trust is going to operate. They're also going to have a policy that's going to be constructed that's going to say how they are going to invest this money. And it's going to give them direction, and that investment policy would be available to be, if somebody else wanted to read that and get insight into how the trustees are investing those assets, that would be in that investment policy. That investment policy has to be consistent with the trust agreement. So whatever decisions are made about the investments, those have to be consistent with what was made in the trust agreement to begin with. So the trustees have to develop a plan, which is really how they think they're going to invest this money. They have to implement it. So they have to go and put the plan in action. And importantly, the third step there is they have to review how the investments are doing on an ongoing basis. So they don't just determine this one time at the beginning, and then the trust continues on for 20 years with no one looking at it. They're going to have to continuously review the results of the trust and determine that the investments are working as they set out to be, and that it's making income that can support the band and those objectives of the trust. So you can go to the next slide. So important investment concepts overall if you're going to set up a trust. So the first one here I would say is consistency with the trust agreement. How you invest the money in the trust has to be consistent with what the trust has been established for. So as Ron said, you have to be investing this money for the benefit of the members of the band. You cannot be investing this money. You can't go and invest it with somebody because there's an ancillary benefit from doing so that's not going to help the band members. Everything has to be done for the benefit of the band members. So that's consistent with the trust agreement. The second one here is what we call intergenerational equity. And really that's just a fancy way of saying you got to fairly secure today as well as the future. So there's an idea here that depending on how the trustees invest the money, it could be a risky investment or a less, low risk investment. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but they have to balance the needs of everyone today. So everyone who, is a beneficiary of these assets today is hoping that these assets are going to generate income and that income can be used, in the community. But there's also the idea of that we have to balance the needs of those people who are here today with the people who might come 30 years from now. Somebody who isn't born, that is going to be born in the future and is, a recipient of this money. So we have to balance what those needs are in the future with the needs of today. And we have to make sure that's somewhat fair, right? So we got to look at that we're always taking into consideration current needs and future needs. And that's part of how you set up that investment policy. The second one is understanding risk and return. And we put there's no free lunch. So if there's an expectation that this money is going to be invested to, make an income to support activity, that there's risk inherent in that when you make an investment. If there is no risk or very low risk, it probably means that there's very low returns that go along with that. But again, if there's very high risk, there may be higher returns. There needs to be a balance between those two sides. And there's also diversification. So don't put all of the money into one investment. So don't take it all and bet on one stock or one kind of investment. The trustees have to consider that they need to diversify across more than one investment. So if you go to the next slide, there's a graph here. And this is really just very simple on how the trustees are going to have to look at setting up the investments. And on the bottom of that graph, I know you can't probably, I don't know if you see my mouse, but basically at the bottom of that says chance of losing money from low to high. And then on the other side, as you go up, it's the chance of making money. So at the bottom, very low chance of losing any of your money is cash. We could just hold the money. So once the money's deposited in the trust, we could just hold it in Canadian dollars. So there's no real chance we're going to lose the money if we do that. But what's the likelihood that we're going to make any income off of that money? And you got to remember, the only way the trust is going to be able to spend money is if it makes money, because it's not supposed to be spending the principal. The original value is not supposed to be spent. So as you go up, you could go to other kind of investments. And maybe at the end there, the higher risk ones are stocks. So you could go buy a stock in the market. It's higher risk. There's a chance you could lose some of your money, but there's also a high chance you could earn income off of that. And you can use that income for the community, as was said earlier. So the trustees have to try to determine where on that top to bottom list that they're going to be invested. And it's quite likely they're going to be invested in more than one thing. And that's the idea that there's a circle there that says the diversified portfolio. So quite likely the trustees are going to put together a strategy that puts some of the money in a lot of different investments so that the risk is mitigated as much as possible, while we also make sure that the trust is going to earn something so that we can take those earnings and spend them as the trust agreement's been put together. So if you go to the next slide, the roles of the trustees. So Ron laid this out, pretty good in terms of, what are they supposed to be doing? I would just say here from the investment perspective, they need to understand the goals and objectives of the trust, that the trust needs to be invested, needs to earn income to support the band, needs to determine what that diversified portfolio looks like. So what is the right kind of investments that the trust needs to be making? And they have to make sure that those goals and objectives of the trust are being met, or we said ideally exceeded. So if there's strong management of the trust, hopefully there's strong returns that come with that. And the stronger the returns, the more there's going to be income to spend from the trust. They need to prudently hire professionals to help them maintain the trust and invest it. So the trustees themselves are quite likely not going to be there choosing individual stocks. They're not going to be there every day kind of determining what to do. They're going to have to hire somebody to work with them because, as Ron said, this is not a full-time job that you would be doing. These trustees are in a volunteer position, so they're going to be working with other service providers to help them carry this out. But again, ultimately, all of the responsibilities on the trustees. So that anything they do, anyone they hire to help them with the trust, they have to vet those individuals and make sure that they're doing the right things. And then the last one there is just they have to be monitoring the performance of the portfolio of the trust to make sure that it's meeting its objectives. That's going to happen in the first 1 to 3 years when the trust is getting set up. But 20 years from now, the trust is supposed to be around in perpetuity. Those trustees are going to be there throughout that period, always checking up on the trust and ensuring that it's performing correctly and that the trust is not at risk of, say, losing a substantial amount of money. So those are the goals of the trustees. Those are going to be the roles with the investments. So I think that's probably my time. On to the next slide. And again, obviously, if there's questions after the meeting, my understanding is they'll come to us and we can help, get any responses back to anyone that has one. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Kyle, the residue piece, how will that be determined?
So the residue, meaning being that the portion of the trust
That will be invested.
Settlement.
Yes.
Yeah, that's to be, yeah. So I probably wouldn't be the best one to speak as to what percentage is going to be, I guess immediately dispersed and then what percentage is going into the trust.
Okay.
I think that's probably maybe more at Jim and Ron's department. But obviously the piece that I'm talking about here is the residue, right? The piece that's going to be invested. The piece that's paid out off the beginning, that would obviously would be going, not into a trust scenario, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Thank
And those for you that are wondering, residue, what is residue? So you see the total amount of the settlement. There's obviously a plan that we heard of earlier for distribution. And as with anything, once you distribute to rightful owners of that settlement, you're left with an amount that is determined for the future beneficiaries of this claim. And that settlement, that is what I am thinking is the residue. Ron, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but that would be the residue we're talking about putting towards these investments. Is that a thumbs up? Or he needs to be unmuted? Yeah. Okay. So okay.
You're exactly correct.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. It's like when you bake a cake and you pour the cake into the bowl, into the pan. The stuff that's left over is the residue. So it won't be that proportion, but we're going to give a large significant sum to the members of the band, and that after that's distributed, what's left over, it'll be determined. That's the residue which will get invested by. Kyle will help the trustees determine where that gets invested in accordance with the investment policy.
Right.
Okay?
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So over, Chief Jerry, are you online? Are you available? You are next, I believe, to provide some closing comments from Chief and Council. And let's get him unmuted, please.
Yeah, we're just working on it there.
Not unmuted, I don't think.
Yep, you are.
Oh, perfect. Okay. No, well, first of all, I'd like to thank our membership for having patience going through some of these technical difficulties. But I would just like to highlight some of the comments our lawyer Jimbo has made in regards to the seriousness of the surrender of the lands and impacts it may have in regards to the claim. And I just want to make clear to our membership that Chief and Council are in no way here to try to influence your vote. It's a vote for the community members to decide for themselves. Our job was just to bring all the pertinent information that we could collect regarding this claim that's been going on for years, and with with the help of previous leadership. So we feel that we provided as much information as possible so our members can make the best informed decision with regards to this vote. And if it is successful, we really take serious. We want to hear from our people, applicants, about who will become the board of trustees. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything else. Do you have anything to say, Council, or no? I know I'm probably forgetting something, but I really encourage our membership to please submit your questions and as soon as possible so we can answer them. You know, have our team to answer them, and I make myself available to our membership. And I know our council would as well, to try and answer any questions that they have. But I think one of the things that I'd like to highlight is, you know, with regards to a few of the land claims that have been settled in our region in the past year, perhaps, you know, we've had, I think we've made a pretty good settlement offer, or we had a good settlement offer that's, I think, more per acre than any other settlement to date. So anyway, I know our membership will do their due diligence, and you know, I know just one that I'm speaking of is Madawaska maybe, and but anyway, that's all I have for now, and look forward to hearing from community members from, you know, from the community and from away, because I know we've received a lot of good questions, a lot of legal questions, and I encourage more to come from this. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and turn it over to the next speaker, or Elder Ida for a closing prayer. So I will just hand this over. So thank you.
Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us all evil. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Well, okay.
Thank you.
So as a reminder, the referendum will take place on May 5th, 2021 at the Annapolis Valley First Nation Community Center. But of course, with the COVID-19 gathering restrictions in mind, Chief and Council are encouraging members to mail in their ballots. So those will also be made available to you. You've had a lot of information presented to you this evening, a lot of great information, but also very detailed information. So if you need any clarification, you have any questions, please reach out and ask your questions. You've got a big decision on your hands as members of Annapolis Valley First Nation. This is a shared responsibility by all of you to make a decision. Both options do have for you a plan for those future generations, which of course for all of us, Mi'kmaq, it's always about the 7 generations. The options provided to you today, this option as well as the other option, do provide that. So keep that in mind when you cast your vote. And I want to thank you all for welcoming me to moderate. I want to thank all the presenters. That was some great information presented today to our technical team. We got through the initial bumps and got through this. So thank you all for participating. Please spread the word. A recording of this presentation will be made available on the website. And I wish you all the best and good luck on your vote to all of you. We'll all be thinking of you on your voting date of May 5th. So take care, everyone. And bye for now.
Bye.